Oh,
hello, everyone.
Hello. Hi, guys. Nice to see you again.
I would just like to begin by saying vindication.
How long's it been, Graham? 4 years?
Oh my God, 4 years. 4 years of trying to warn people about what trans rights activism was proposing and who was proposing it. Aimee Challenor, maybe we should give a bit of background first. Things have really kicked off this week. Reddit recently employed Aimee Challenor as a moderator. This followed Reddit banning groups like Gender Critical, which had 65,000 members. And now we can kind of see that this was all part of Reddit's circling the wagons almost in advance to protect Challenor. Artie, you have a friend who's a Redditor. How's it going down with him?
Well, it's going down like a flaming dumpster fire of poop. It's like, from what I hear, I'm not very familiar with Reddit. I haven't spent a lot of time on Reddit myself, but from what I hear, it's a real crazy shit show. There's pandemonium and chaos. Just to give a little bit of background, so Reddit is a social media website. It has a bunch of message boards, essentially. It has its own very sort of unique culture, and it has hundreds of millions of users. But a lot of people general users can become moderators of these various message boards, which are called subreddits. And some people become major moderators. They come to dominate the moderation of like a bunch of the more popular subreddits. Some of them can have even millions of viewers and participants. So Aimee Challenor and people she's involved with have come to dominate moderating Reddit. And they're dangerous people, and we've been warning about them forever. And it was shocking enough that they, as just users, ended up becoming power users and dominated Reddit. But Aimee Challenor has been put on the payroll, has been formally hired by Reddit, and is now not just a moderator, but an administrator, and now has the keys to the kingdom, can go behind the scenes and perhaps even access people's private information and dox them, because this person now works from within the organization. So that's shocking enough. But once that happened, Aimee Challenor has taken it upon herself, or the organization for some reason has taken it upon themselves, to decide that any negative mention of her is just going to be completely nuked and obliterated. And this is a person who's a public figure, who was involved in 2 political parties, was a fundraiser for Elizabeth Warren's political campaign. This is not a private citizen. This is a public figure with a Wikipedia page. And you can't mention anything about this person's life, or you'll just get banned instantly. They will delete. It's shocking because moderators of these message boards will often delete comments that fall outside of their rules. But now we've got Reddit, the organization itself, going in and deleting individual comments. And that just seems like such a breach of Reddit's own policies. And it's like something that no one's ever seen before. But there's absolute rebellion from within Reddit. Everybody's deliberately mentioning her name. They're literally just going into messages and typing in her name to see if if Reddit's administrators are going to go in and delete the comment. But what's happening is people's entire accounts are being permanently banned everywhere. And then all these subreddits about anything, subreddits about, train spotting or horse fancying or whatever, they're all getting into this now and saying, we need to talk about this person.
And they're getting into it. Reddit has actually gone on strike.
Can I just make the point?
Yes.
For anyone who might not know, I imagine most people do know that Challenor is trans. I do want to make that point because, the whole she thing.
Well, I would rather clarify, Challenor self-identifies as a trans person, as a trans-identifying male. Although I personally would make the distinction that there are some genuine sympathetic people with dysphoria, and there are other people who identify as members of the opposite sex for various reasons that I don't have a lot of respect for. But yeah.
Well, people are saying in the comments him, and I agree. I'd like to talk about this a little bit because there's while this was being discussed, and we're talking about a young girl who was raped and tortured in the attic of a house in Coventry. There were people complaining about misgendering Challenor. You know, so this is a very good example of what I mean when I talk about grooming. even on Reddit, even when they're making this brilliant stand against the circling of wagons around this, let's say, paedophile adjacent person, they're still concerned about. They're still trying to force people to call him by female pronouns and put all his kind of bad decisions on women. Women are nothing to do with this.
No, that's a really good point. When you're gendering this someone as female, you're saying this is something that's being done by women. But I want to talk about the misgendering thing's really interesting. I was on Reddit with my friend last night and posted some information about Aimee Challenor. I think we should give a brief summary. On this show, we've talked about Challenor many times, but there may be some viewers who haven't seen it. So Aimee Challenor lived in a small house in Coventry with, I'm going to use feminine pronouns just for the sake of ease. This young person lived in a shack, essentially, in Coventry, central England, with his father. And his father was a hardcore sex fetishist and built a sex torture dungeon in the house, essentially. And the father was involved in cross-dressing and diaper play. And the son, by the age of 14, was also, I know it's the worst, was also publicly involved in diaper play and cross-dressing, and had an online social media presence, was already taking selfies wearing diapers. And by 16, had also started cross-dressing and had adopted a feminine name. Now, the problem is once you cross-dress and adopt a feminine name, that qualifies you as a transgender person. And if you're a transgender teen, you're like a magical unicorn. So everybody wanted to get involved with this person and use this person to advance their own cause. They were like a cause célèbre, right? Yeah. So this person became involved in LGBT activist politics. So this is a teenage boy who has been living in a sex torture house with his abusive father. But because he cross-dresses, is now considered a transgender teen.
A rising star.
A rising star, and very quickly, by 17, was the head of the Green Party's LGBTQ team, and by the age of 20, was running to become the second in command of the National Green Party, which is a major party in the United Kingdom. Yeah. Second in command by age 20. This is shocking. But at the same time all this was happening, the father, who he was living with in this sex torture shack, had been charged with torture and rape of a 10-year-old girl. It was brutal assault. It was horrible inside the house. And the whole time, Aimee Challenor's political star was rising. She was living in a house and best friends with her father, who was facing charges and going through this long, slow criminal process of being charged with this brutal act of rape and torture of a 10-year-old girl. And at the exact same time that Aimee Challenor's election was happening and the votes were being counted, her father was convicted of torture and rape and sentenced to 22 years in prison. And this kicked off a whole scandal where everyone was like, oh my God, why are you living with and best friends with and employing your father, who has in your own home tortured and raped a 10-year-old girl? Aimee Challenor denied all knowledge of everything, which was just patently, obviously false, said that everyone was transphobic for mentioning any of it, and ran off in a huff and left the Green Party, and was picked up by the Lib Dems, who are trying to, again, this is a, everybody wants a trans teen on their in their employ.
The Lib Dems just kind of welcomed him without question, no question whatsoever.
Yeah, and so did Stonewall, the national gay rights organization, which is now just a trans rights organization in the UK. Stonewall employed this person as well. And when the scandal erupted, everybody stood their ground and accused anyone of being transphobic if they mentioned any of it. Yes. Until a second scandal erupted, when it found out that Aimee Challenor became engaged to be married to a man named Nathaniel Knight, who was publicly bragging about his pedophilic obsessions, would write fan fiction about molesting children, declared himself a pedophile publicly more than once. And so once again, Aimee Challenor finds himself amidst a bunch of pedophiles. So Aimee Challenor was kicked out of the Lib Dems. Eventually, I guess, Stonewall distanced themselves from this person, but they did it so secretly and quietly.
No, did you not know this, Artie?
No.
I'll put a link in the description. I wrote a piece for Feminist Current called "Why is Aimee Challenor Still Advising Stonewall?" Right? The next day, she disappeared from the site.
Oh my God.
So they only removed her when they were absolutely forced to. And you know, I mean, I'll come back to this a few times, and I don't want to stop your flow, Artie. But in fact, I won't stop your flow. Keep going. Let's finish this.
Well, we're getting this. So we've had 2 political parties, 2 scandals, fathers in prison, husband, fiance is a pedophile. Aimee Challenor decides to cross the Atlantic and try her hand in American politics. Left for America, and then signed up to become a fundraiser for Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign. Remember, Elizabeth Warren was really trying to position herself as like the most trans-friended candidate in the universe, was just pandering to trans. So it was a match made in heaven. But thankfully, Elizabeth Warren's campaign faltered. She did not win the Democratic primary. It was, of course, Joe Biden who did so. And that was the end of Aimee Challenor's political ambitions. Came back to the United Kingdom. And then started hanging around with somebody named Peter Swales, who is a hardcore Reddit.
I could be wrong, but I think Swales has known Challenor for a number of years. Yes. Swales and Nathaniel Knight, I think, both met Challenor when Challenor was 14 years old.
That seems to be the case, or very young, 14, 15, or at the very latest 16. But
they're both 14 years older than Challenor.
That's right. And Peter Swales lived in Scotland, and would drive to Coventry with other older men to have cuddle time with young Aimee. So the impression one gets is that Aimee's father had a circle of friends who were a pedophile ring, and they were passing the child around. Is the impression one gets. I know that's very blunt, and I know it's very disturbing and upsetting. I'm sorry, but that seems to have been what happened. But one of these men who was paying visits to young Aimee Challenor is now in the marriage. They've decided to open their marriage into a 3-way marriage. So we've got Aimee and Daddy Nathaniel and Mommy Peter Swales, who goes by Katrina and is a trans-identified person as well. But Katrina was a is a very powerful moderator at Reddit. Yeah. And so Nathaniel and Aimee started getting involved in Reddit moderation and trying to dominate this sort of environment of moderating Reddit subs. And they came to dominate it, and then they started purging. They got so much power, they started purging all the radical feminists and all the gender critics and all the, LGB dropped the T. Trans was dropped for a minute there, like anything critical of transgender ideology or gender identity theory, I'd rather say, because we don't have
if any journalists are following any of this up, one place they might try and start an account with is Ovarit. Ovarit. It is a social networking site that was set up by a lot of the people who were banned by Aimee Challenor, and Knight and whoever else. So if any journalists are looking into this, that's a good place to root around. I'm sure they're talking about what's been going on in the last few days here. So anyway, so then he goes to Reddit.
Then he goes to Reddit. They start dominating as power users and Reddit moderators. They start actively purging and transforming the narrative of Reddit that it's not a safe place to talk about gender critical opinions at all. To be critical of gender identity ideology, which isn't the same thing as hatred of trans people. Always remember that if you're a new person watching this. And then now, shockingly, Aimee Challenor has been hired and put on the actual literal payroll, which is insane. But again, it's this tokenism, this like a young trans person. It's like something that everybody wants to have in their employ because they think it makes them look virtuous.
And I also say that there's an element of, I imagine Challenor and Knight are both very skilled with the internet and know the territory, so they're probably good at what they do, apart from the pedophilia.
Well, they're good at what they do if what they do is self-promotion in the cause of trying to gain access to women and children and eliminate safety barriers, which is exactly what they're doing. So that's the situation. And as we've all seen, Graham and Helen, I'm sure there's just been pandemonium all day.
Reddit have many of the most popular subs containing over 100,000 users alone. Like one sub will have more than 100,000 users, have gone on strike in the sense that they have made their Reddits private. So no one from the outside can see what's going on inside these Reddits. Which makes Reddit, I would imagine, a much harder site to navigate because normally things go on the front page and they're from a combination of all the different groups. And I don't think that can happen at the moment. So it's a brilliant stand by Redditors, but it's interesting. Let's quickly go back to the misgendering. One thing I noticed, and I would put this to Redditors who are out there: please start joining the dots. There's I've noticed a lot of stuff like, well, Graham Linehan is an arsehole, but he happened to be right here. A stop clock is right. It's like, no, it's like try and actually think about this. This is what we've been saying from the start, that gender identity ideology empowers abusive men who are identifying as trans. Okay, and this is the most perfect example I've ever seen of it. You also see people within the within Reddit saying, if you're feeling guilty about criticizing Aimee, donate some money to Mermaids, which is donating. You might as well say, if you're worried about going after Jimmy Savile, give some money to NAMBLA. I mean, the thing about it, one thing you must remember is, there's a lot of. I do have some sympathy for Challener, right? I do have some sympathy because I think he never had a chance. Okay,
no,
he's a young kid. He had a pedophile for a father. He was introduced to other pedophiles at a very, very young age, right? So he has himself been groomed to think that all this is normal. So I do feel sorry for him to that extent. But one of the things that Challener said, and I'm going to see if I can find the quote as we're speaking about this, is that Mermaids referred him to the Tavistock, So Mermaids took an autistic child who was abused, probably, or at least somehow a participant in something that wasn't right, and they told this guy, oh yeah, you're trans, So please stop thinking that Mermaids are this wonderful, innocent group. They are and if you don't believe me, you don't even have to look at something that's written by our side. Look at Susie Green's speech to the TED audience. Just look up Susie Green TED Talk and look at her speech. She literally says it clearly. She says, we transitioned our child because my husband was uncomfortable with him, with his gender nonconformity. She says it. And the audience applauds as if it's the most wonderful thing in the world. So please start joining the dots. Yeah. Sorry, Helen, I just wanted to, I'll segue into something else that maybe we can get your comment on, because you haven't been speaking at all.
No, that's fine. I think it's important that you tell this story.
Great.
I'm quite interested that it's beginning to make waves now. Finally, people are, there's more than just a few little corner of Twitter picking up on it.
Yes.
I mean, I know Jesse Single has been tweeting it out a lot, but it's still really frustrating that he says things like, this woman's father.
I know. It's like, Jesse, you're insulting every woman when you put war crimes on women. Stop it.
And it prevents the real story. He's talking about censorship, but he's censoring himself. Now, I can see why he's doing it. I mean, he's doing it because he doesn't want to get banned from Twitter like the rest of us.
Yeah. All he has to do is avoid using pronouns,
But yes, but he doesn't have to say this woman, and he doesn't have to say she. Can say this person or they, and I do, and it does irritate me that the story is getting buried a little bit, because it's far more obvious what's going on when you make the connection that Challener isn't actually a born woman.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I'm hoping that Redditors, now that they have had their eyes open to one aspect of this, open their eyes to all the other aspects, which is, I mean, there's a famous essay, we always talk about it, and I try and share it wherever I can, and it's Pronouns are Rohypnol. right? And it's the talking about Jesse. It's Jesse Single and Redditors talking about Aimee, calling him she all the time. That is the most perfect example of why we think pronouns are Rohypnol. Your compelled speech when applied to pedophile adjacent males is not just it's not kind, it's not polite, it's actually dangerous, and we should be rejecting it completely, and next week we've got some exciting news. Next week we're going to have a special Trans Day of Visibility, and we're going to have all our favorite trans allies on. A few people haven't asked yet, so I won't give the full list yet. But all the people we have on, I think they, would generally like if people called them she, but they've never demanded it. They would never demand it, and that's the difference between the trans people we know who are allies to women and everyone else. So
but I do. Sorry, I was still talking about Jesse Single here.
Yes.
I think he's really. I think people are beginning to sit up and notice, because there's also the whole that Glaad thing going on. That
was fascinating.
Yes, absolutely fascinating, wasn't it? The what was it called? The Glaad accountability project.
The Glaad accountability
project.
They had J.K. Rowling on it,
where they just name people and say, look at what these people have done, to hold them to account. But what was really interesting, before they've actually shut it down now, because they said, we published it too early, but we will publish it again soon, but we won't change anything in it. But they said about Single that he'd said that some trans children desist.
Yeah.
And you're like, but this is actually true. This is the absolute literal truth.
Yes.
And what Glaad are doing is that they're trying to provoke moral outrage over the truth. They're trying to present the truth as a lie. And this is so dangerous. This is like the epitome of fake news here. And it's just, I cannot believe that they are allowed to get away with it. But of course they will get away with it, because this is the way that it works now. You have to present the truth with a load of outrage and say, look how dreadful it is, because we know it works. Like J.K. Rowling, she can never, I don't think, clear her name now. She's always going to be synonymous with anti-trans, because the myth has spread so widely. And it's an incredibly dangerous thing. I think the only thing we can hope for is that everyone in the end is labelled anti-trans, and therefore no one will care. No, I mean, seriously, I honestly think that's the only thing that could save us.
I think we're definitely approaching that stage, the kind of, the people just laugh off transphobic and TERF now. They don't really take it seriously for the most part, I think.
Well, it's a mix. It's like some people do and some people don't. Like last night,
people who are surprised by it are always shocked and immediately start kind of reversing, and reversing things they've said and so on. Like that woman who was speaking about who's got something to do with the clitoris. Let's see if I can find her.
Did you say something to do with the clitoris?
The clitoris. But she was like talking about female biology, and then they went after her, and then she's apologizing like crazy and says she's never going to talk about it again, and calling people cis and all that sort of stuff, So it's when people are kind of surprised by it, that's when they panic and they try and make amends. But the people who are used to, I mean, once it happens a few times, you're kind of the only thing that's ever surprising is when you see it. Sorry, I've been distracted because someone's joining us. Who's very exciting. Is when you see it in actual newspapers. I mean, it's extraordinary that's going on, and I'm trying to challenge it whenever I see it, but it's difficult because they. Anyway, sorry, I've lost my train of thought because we have someone very interesting in now. Let me just segue into this next bit. Reddit are following the same pattern that the Greens followed originally, then Lib Dems. What they do is basically they get Aimee in, they circle the wagons for a while, and then they delete every mention of her they can. Like Sean Berry spent one evening diligently deleting every single time. This is the leader of the Greens, or a leader of the Greens. I'm not sure if it's the actual leader. Andy will tell us in a second. But Sean Berry went through it and just deleted all mention of Aimee Challenor. The Greens, the Lib Dems did the same thing. In fact, I'm going to be sharing Natalie Bird's crowdfunder soon. Natalie Bird was expelled from the Greens for challenging Challenor and for talking about Challenor, which wasn't allowed. And now Reddit are doing exactly the same thing. In fact, Reddit told the most extraordinary lie. They said that Challenor was being doxxed.
That's right.
Yes,
which is just
I saw that.
Flat out lie.
And honestly, and everyone is saying, what a lie. Everyone is saying that's just a complete lie. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. And and they can't get away with it. In fact, that was such a great thing for Reddit to say, because I think that really has piqued people, and they've seen just a blatant lie being told to everyone.
Yeah.
Exactly. So listen, let's get Andy in for a few minutes, and we'll just get him to talk about his experience. Andy, hello, how are you?
Hi, Graham. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm fine, thanks.
Hi, Andy.
Good to see you.
Hi, Artie.
Andy, I know you've told this story a million times, but you were one of the earliest people to see what happened when you went up when people go up against Challenor. Can you describe to us exactly a shortened version of what happened to you?
Briefly, yeah. I guess I started challenging what was going on in the Green Party, which led me to Aimee Challenor at the beginning of 2016. What happened, it sort of escalated at the beginning of 2017 when Aimee Challenor was centred at put at the centre of a Green Party tweet about International Women's Day. Right. And I sort of replied with screenshots exposing him, calling women TERFs, and exposing his sexism, basically, and identifying him as a man, because that's I felt that was my responsibility, and that's what he was. So I was then hit with attempted criminal prosecution, attempted civil injunction, and a suspension from the party, which involved a visit from David Challenor, who hired a car with Aimee and drove up to my house to hand over the court summons. David was then in court, whispering advice to Aimee throughout the initial hearing. And although the judge turned down the initial demand for an initial injunction, the fact that it was hanging over my head, for the next couple of years, sort of helped.
You were suspended, weren't you, from the Green Party?
I was suspended from the Green Party, yeah. Then I was briefly back in again, and then I got a 2-year suspension, which has just finished. So I'm back in again.
Oh, good. Well, that's good.
Wow.
I hope you'll. Sean Berry.
Has anyone apologised?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Has Sean Berry apologised? Has anyone apologised?
Plenty of it, and none of the people that matter. I think. Yeah. I guess the problem is that, and it's partly what makes challenging Challenor, in the last few years, been difficult, because the Green Party leadership has never acknowledged the truth of what actually went on. And the official line is that Aimee Challenor was a completely innocent victim and David Challenor had very little influence. And there's a lot of people's political careers are invested in keeping that line going. It hasn't been challenged in the party, really. Well, it has individuals, but the leadership's line has stayed the same, really.
Yeah. I found an old tweet from the LGBT plus Lib Dem account, where people were telling them what Challenor was doing and what was going on and why it was wrong, and the fact that the new boyfriend, because this is what got him out of the Lib Dems, was a paedophile, and the LGBT Lib Dems response was, "Can you include us out of this conversation, please?" You know, like this is supposedly a group within the Lib Dems that are set up to protect LGBT people, and they were, you know, just not interested in this story. And here's another thing, Andy. I'm not sure if you know much about this aspect of it. I'm sure you do, because like all of us, when you've crossed paths with these people, you become a little bit obsessed. But Aimee Challenor also began an organization in Coventry called Prism, and Prism were for advertised that they would help gender kind of, you know, indecisive kids from the ages of 13 up, you know. And do you know much about Prism?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it surprised me that they weren't mentioned in the Verity report, because Challenor was, you know, worked with Prism during this whole time period, and for a couple of years after was their deputy director. And yes, it had lots of worrying links with paedophile networks.
Yes,
around Coventry. Yeah, basically.
I got a letter from someone who said that their child was seen by them at the age of 12. They kind of thought, oh well, you know, not 13, but we'll look the other way this time and brought them in and luckily the child, you know, grew out of the idea after a while, as apparently 98% of kids do when they're not being put on a fast track to transitioning. And also, Andy, was it you who was saying that there was a convicted paedophile who was part of Prism?
A guy called James Riley, who was chair of both Prism and Coventry and Warwickshire Friend, was a convicted paedophile. It wasn't mentioned when his trial was reported and his sentencing. They didn't mention that this connection with Prism, and he was Coventry Warwickshire Friend. So yeah, he was chair at times when Aimee Challenor was vice chair, I believe. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost as if he knows. It's almost as if Aimee Challenor knows a lot of paedophiles.
It's almost as if she's involved in a network of them.
you could almost call it a ring, couldn't you?
I was astonished at this. I did not. I mean, I've seen a lot of this happen. I mean, I remember this happening to you, Andy, but I did not know about Prism.
Yeah.
It went under the radar.
It is astonishing. And isn't it the fucking thing, Andy? I mean, you know, and I know, we all know that these are major news stories and no one's reporting on them.
Fucking major news stories.
No one's reporting on them.
I mean, it was finally, the Prism thing was finally picked up at the end of 2019 when a Sunday Mirror reporter approached me about commenting on an article they were planning to do about the appropriateness of Challenor being involved with Prism, which I was quoted in. Challenor was immediately onto the paper to try and get it suppressed, and then along to the police the next day to try and initiate another criminal prosecution. So this is sort of the way people work, and it can take a lot of time and energy, and can silence people even if it fails. Like, you know, Challenor didn't get his injunction or the criminal prosecution, but you know, the time and energy and
stress,
it had an effect by itself. Yeah.
Well, someone who I can't mention because I've got a trial coming up next month, but someone who identifies as a lawyer actually advised Challenor to sue me when I started revealing Challenor using a block bot that was blocking lots of feminists. This person advised Challenor to sue me. So I wonder whether that might have kind of led to what happened to you as well, Andy, because as we both know, the use of the police as a kind of a secondary harassment tool along with the courts is quite a common tactic amongst these kinds of activists.
I got a visit from the police over the criminal prosecution. I'd already spoken to the police in Coventry, who were, to be fair, were very fair and even-handed about it. But I got a personal visit from local Sheffield PC, who basically came in with the deliberate intention of forcing me to sign an admission of guilt form.
Amazing. Let's tell people once again that why is this not a news story? This is the police asking as reputational bodyguards for pedophiles.
And the police officer admitted it surprised him. He sort of implied he knew that there was nothing in it, but that his bosses, were put a priority to this kind of case, as he said,
that's
clarification.
Yes. And why would that be? That would be because Stonewall have been advising the police. Stonewall, who had at their very heart Aimee Challenor on the Trans Advisory Board when they were pushing self-ID and influencing institutions all over the UK. I guess there's no question. So I should remember, gotta ask a question. That's the important thing. So Andy, where are you now? I mean, do you feel like things are changing in the Green Party? There was that brilliant thing recently, a strike by one branch of the Green Party. Do you think might see more?
Yeah, I mean the Challener trial was a wake-up call for a lot of people in the Green Party. So there's been a lot of resistance going on behind the scenes since, really, people trying to reclaim the party, and that's slowly emerging in various ways. So although in a way the Green Party got hit and taken over very early, it's also, I think there's a lot of signs, people can see how things can lead, basically, and how so there's a lot of determination to change things and stop the takeover within the Greens. Yeah, and that's why I'm still involved, because there's many fantastic Green Party activists and councillors who are trying to resist this and doing good things for the Green Party locally.
Yeah. What about Catherine Bristow? Is that the person's name? This is somebody who's with the LGBTQI plus. Oh no, it's the Green Party women, I believe, is the trans.
Oh, that's hilarious. This is the funniest story. In fact, Andy, I think this is actually kind of a good thing, because it's so insane that I think it's really drawing attention to what's happening at the Green Party. The Green Party used to have 2 co-chairs for the women's Green Party. What is it? What do you call it? Co-chairs of the women's group?
Green Party women.
Yeah.
Green Party women, co-chairs. They had a man and a woman, a woman and a trans-identified male called Catherine Bristow, and they got rid of the woman. So the only chair of Green Party women is a male. It's the most extraordinary thing.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So I think stuff like that might actually be good news in the end, Andy, because I think that the craziness is really in people's faces these days.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, listen, Andy, I thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that if there's anything else that you find out about this situation, please come back and let us know. And I do hope that someday soon the Green Party can go back to fighting climate change instead of discussing whether people with a penis are lesbians.
Yes, thank you so much, Andy. It was lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you, Andy.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye-bye. So like
that is insane. That is insane. I just want to say that once more. How is this not national news? That whole story, and I remember it happening at the time, and I remember just saying, "What is going on?" Because this was really at the start of the insanity of the politicians getting involved. Before then, it was mainly sort of just feminists. But at this point, all of the parties were getting involved. And I remember it happening. And how is it not something that people are looking back on now saying, oh, my God, remember that insanity time?
Yeah.
Because we're still there.
We're still
there. It was only the beginning of the insanity time.
And if people had spoken about it, we wouldn't be, Reddit would have known better than to hire this person and put them on their payroll, This Challener.
Reddit must have known. They must have Googled. They did it regardless.
I just can't wrap my head around that. This person was very clearly,
Having said that, I mean, we all know how, there seems to be, I call it a tiered reality, where, I mean, you have people now who believe completely that Challener is a woman. They just do not see a man when they see Challener. They see a woman. I see a man with long hair.
I don't think that's true.
Really?
People say it.
Yeah, but they don't believe it. Maybe.
Nobody believes it.
I don't know. I mean, I think kids have convinced themselves. I don't know. Someone said
what kids have convinced themselves that the word woman means something different to biological females. I mean, that's what's happened, isn't it? You know, and people have been convinced that there is an essence that makes you like a woman. People don't look and say, oh, that is a full-on biological female, but they do believe that there's a woman essence.
Yeah.
And that people have it.
Yes, exactly. It's extraordinary, and as we were saying, it makes it very difficult to discuss what's going on. I mean, can you imagine a better situation for pedophiles than if you call them he, you'll be kicked from social networks? I mean, it's an absolute dream situation for groomers and pedophiles and the kind of people who like to bend reality. Like every groomer is someone who's trying to bend reality into a shape that points them as a wonderful person or someone
even if you remove the paedophilia, it's still incredibly disturbing that there are male people getting women kicked off social media for advocating for the rights of children and women. I mean, that itself is dreadful. But then you add in the clear links in some areas to paedophilia. It's insane.
But the other thing about it is, I keep emphasizing this because it's another aspect that I'm just astonished it isn't a bigger news story. Why is no one covering this story? Aimee Challenor was at the heart of Stonewall. Stonewall have been advising institutions, including the police, the courts, the NHS, all over the UK. A paedophile adjacent person has been giving advice to all these, and these fucking people have been following the advice. You know, the NHS is following the advice. The NHS is allowing males on women's wards. The men are going into women's prisons. You know.
Yes, and you've got to look at it. You've got to say it was, from what we know, it was Challenor's father who was being imprisoned for this. However, it was definitely the case that Challenor was taking advice from their dad in the Green Party. Like, we know this. We absolutely know this. So even from that aspect, we know that this person is not trustworthy in terms of advice. And yet not just, the Greens were championing them, and then they went on to the Lib Dems and then over to Elizabeth Warren. How?
Yeah, I mean,
there's something going on where because there's something about trans, this one issue, I think that makes everybody turn their brains off completely. It's not just that people are want to be good-hearted towards this issue. It's that I think people are a little bit afraid that there's something wrong. I think everybody can detect that there's something there's something off about transgender. There's a sort of unstable falsehood right at the heart of it, and we all have to collude together in pretending we don't see it. And because of that sort of sense of like we all have to conceal our own doubt about the veracity of this somehow, that means that nobody can apply any critical thinking to it whatsoever. You know what I mean? There's something going on where obvious dangers, people who are just obvious red flags because they have the word trans next to their names. It's just a signal to everybody to just don't criticize, don't look at it.
Yeah. Well, people are worried about getting it wrong, aren't they? They're worried, because of the whole. Just for example, when gay men were equated with pedophiles, people are so frightened of getting it wrong again that they're completely erring on the side of absolute fucking insanity.
Yeah, but I always emphasize this point. There was a lot of criticism of pedophilia in the gay rights movement, but that's because there was pedophilia in the gay rights movement. The honest truth is that there were problems. Yeah, PIE and NAMBLA were there. There were a lot of activists. I'm not saying gay people were pedophiles, but just the kinds of gay people who became front and center activists, the outspoken ones, were the ones who had a bigger agenda than just gay rights, who also wanted access to sex with minors. And that's often the case with any activist movement. The loudest activists are the dangerous ones, are the ones who have ulterior motives, you know?
Well, Peter Tatchell, who has been another person who calls women bigots and is another person who puts the ring of protection around anyone with trans in front of their name. Peter Tatchell wrote a letter to a British newspaper where he spoke approvingly of sex between men and children. You know, and this has been kind of he's claimed, much as in the same way Challeonor claimed that his husband's account was hacked when the husband started writing, "I like thinking about having sex with kids." He also Thatchell claimed that his letter was edited, you know, and I think the truth isn't that it was edited. It was just that Thatchell realized he should have edited it, you know. Right. He went on about, if you look this up, he went on about the Simba tribe, right, saying that there's lots of very healthy things that happen in the Simba tribe. But the thing is, at the time, no one had Wikipedia. You know, so they would read this in the newspaper and go, "Oh, the Simba tribe, they sound great." But I recommend people go on Wikipedia and look up the Simba tribe and see exactly what Peter was putting forward there.
But all that is to say that, like, the gay rights movement needed critical evaluation. It needed to be looked at critically to make it stronger, to make it better. And that's
that's a good point.
Movement. Yes. There's a way to have a healthy, to carve out a space for people with gender dysphoria and people who want to live as members of the opposite sex. But the only way to make that work is to look at this and critically evaluate it, really understand what transsexualism is, really understand who transsexuals are, really set some guidelines around what kinds of exceptions we're going to make for these people, what kinds of role we're going to set out in society for these people. We have to talk about this stuff openly, and that's the only way we could separate out the dangerous predators from this movement. You know, we're talking about giving male-bodied people access to perhaps spaces with women and children, and we're talking about letting them be treated as women and children when women and children aren't a danger the way males are. So right at the heart of this, this is an opening for danger, and we have to guard that opening. There's a gate there. And that's not happening. You know, a lot of people argue, trans people aren't predators and pedophiles. But the corollary of that is predators and pedophiles aren't trans people. And the only way to make them not trans people is to gatekeep what counts as a trans person, so that when they try to say that they are, you can look them in the eye and say, no, you aren't. You know.
But let's talk about another. I mean, it's. Oh, sorry, Helen. Go ahead.
So I just want to say the who's silencing is about this, isn't it? Feminists for years have been saying, let's talk about this. Let's have an honest, open conversation about it. Let's try and sort it out. And the other side is saying, no debate, you evil bigots. I mean, no debate is even a slogan. It's not even a pretense. It's not even a euphemism. It's a literal slogan that they were using. There is no debate.
Yeah, when you and there is no debate because they simply fall back on these lines of dogma, like trans women are women, no debate. You're reducing people to your genitals. All the
thought-terminating cliches designed to shut everyone up.
Cliches. My favorite one is the bathroom in your home is gender neutral. The dumbest argument that's ever been.
Yes, actually, I was thinking of publishing a whole book of ridiculous responses to the whole gender.
Yeah,
maybe I'll start with an
then
article.
Again, there's only about 20. I mean, they fall back on maybe 20 lines. You know,
it's true.
But the thing about Challeonor, I just want to, because God, doesn't time fly when you're being vindicated? The thing about Challeonor is when I started writing about Challeonor, that was when the Irish woke started to really come after me. The rubber bandits, people like that would, call me Morrissey and stuff like this, because I was exposing a very dodgy person who had a huge amount of power. And like, it's great now that this is coming out and stuff, but it illustrates something about Ireland that I think I think Ireland slipped into more naturally than other countries. And it's simply this: we are creating another priest caste. We are creating another caste of people, a sacred caste who cannot be questioned, who cannot be investigated, who cannot even be spoken about. You know, this is extremely dangerous for safeguarding. The thing that you do not do is create a class of people who are untouchable. You know, that's what happened in Boston. That's what happened in Ireland, and it's happening again now. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of make that point, because Ireland thinks that it's becoming so progressive and so on, but I think in many ways it's just falling into the same habits they were in before. You know. So what do you think will happen here? Do you think Reddit will? I mean, Reddit. I'm surprised they haven't already capitulated and gotten rid of.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. What is going to happen? Because right now there's serious unrest at Reddit. A lot of major subreddits are going private, it seems to be a way for the moderators of these subreddits. If they take their channels private, it seems like they can discuss Challenor openly with people who have been privately invited to participate in these Reddits. And I mean major ones, like everything. Like my friend just sent me a list of some of them. Let me see if I can read you some of them. iPhone, Mac, music, Reddit music, like everything is just, everybody's taking their channels private. Everybody's angry. All the moderators are really, really angry at Reddit. They're going to have to do something. And they're going to have to do something big, but what can they do? How do they say, oh, I'm sorry, we accidentally hired a pedophile adjacent predator? You know?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because on the other side, I actually really dislike this sort of people saying, you've got to fire somebody because of something that they said. However, this isn't something that they've said, is it?
No.
This is behavior that they have exhibited. And it's quite a clear behavior that they've exhibited. This isn't J.K. Rowling saying, actually, sometimes, there used to be a word for women where everyone's like, oh my God, what a terrible woman, let's send her death and rape threats until she's cancelled by all her publishers.
Yeah.
So there is, I do think Reddit have to not have a knee-jerk reaction and immediately sort of fire somebody and say, okay, we've capitulated to the mob. I think they need to think about it, consider it carefully, and come out with a very, very, very clear statement of what they have done and why they have done it.
That's a very good point. Yes, I totally agree. But what it looks like at the moment is that they've no intention of doing this, because we know they've already lied about Challener being doxxed. That's an extraordinary thing for them to do.
And it's not just a matter of them explaining what they have done, but they're going to have to change their rules. Because right now, anybody who talks about Aimee Challenor their account is being deleted. They're being banned. And the numbers are just outrageous. The sheer number of people, users of Reddit, major lifelong users of Reddit, who are being expelled. They can't keep this up. They're going to have to turn around and say, look, we're going to have to allow discussion of Aimee Challenor. We're going to have to allow discussion of this controversy. Or they're just going to end up, everybody's going to leave Reddit. There's so much anger right now. This can't stand. Nobody's tolerating this. So, I mean, what I suspect maybe will happen will be that. They will say, okay, we'll have to allow discussion of Aimee Challenor to happen. And Aimee Challenor will leave in a huff. Aimee Challenor will decide, oh, this place is too transphobic for me.
Yeah.
Maybe that will. I think for Reddit, that's probably the best solution, isn't it? That they don't have to fire anyone, and that somebody leaves themselves. However, I do think that I hope they do something, because I do hope that the power of the people do prevail here. Because unfortunately, the social networks that we have, the platforms, are monopolies, and they do have a huge amount of power. So I'm so pleased that so many Redditors have fought back over this. I think this is the biggest. This is the biggest challenge to that monopoly power that these social network platforms do have. So I really hope that it's a way. And I hope that Facebook and Twitter and everyone looks at it and says, actually, there are limits to what people are willing to put up with obvious disregard to, let's see, balance of rules.
Yeah. But I also, I mean, it has been really inspiring and brilliant the way Redditors are rebelling. But for God's sake, please join the dots. There's more to this than just one kind of,
Yes.
weird group of people who are suddenly moderators. It is all linked together. It is hard for women to talk about their rights. 65,000 women were fucking disenfranchised by Challener, and there was no controversy about that. There should have been. You need to start standing up for women. And I'm hoping that this is just the start of what I call the peakening, which where I hope it is the start of it, because this isn't going to be done by, there's no adults in the room. You are the adults in the room. You have to start thinking about this in a very, very serious way. And if you don't do that, no one else is going to do it for you. So keep fighting, and fucking join the dots. Keep joining the dots.
Yeah. Listen, can we end it on there? Perhaps I have to leave.
I have to do stuff as well.
Because Canada's lifted its lockdown, hasn't it, Andy?
That's right. Yeah.
Tending bar. So if you're in Canada, you can go and visit Eddie and get a drink. Yes. I think there's probably, we're going to have more to talk about soon. But next week, as I say, is Trans Day of Remembrance. No, not Remembrance. Sorry, excuse me. That's the other Trans Day. Trans Day of Visibility. And we're going to have a group of people who are trans who actually like women. So that's going to be very nice. And we'll see you next week.
We'll see you then. Okay. Like and subscribe.
Please.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.